Sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun or a bomb. It's a single phrase that opens doors sealed by decades of silence. The sun crawled over Fort Darlington like a lazy cat, casting long shadows across the parade grounds. It was one of those muggy Virginia mornings where the air felt thick enough to chew, and even the most starched uniforms would be wilted by noon. The base hummed with nervous energy, soldiers checking and double-checking equipment, civilians in their Sunday best clutching programs, and enough brass to outfit a marching band. Today marked 50 years since Operation Cinderweg, a Cold War mission so classified that even half a century later, most of the details remain buried in Pentagon vaults. It was also Fort Darlington's swan song. After today's ceremony, the base would be mothballed, another piece of military history consigned to the archives. At the security checkpoint bordering the main parade area, Private Langston stood like a young oak tree, straight-backed and immovable. The metal barricades behind him might as well have been the gates of heaven for how strictly he guarded them. Beyond those barriers, a massive white command tent dominated the landscape like a cloud that had decided to touch down on Earth. Inside, three-star generals rubbed elbows with senators, and aging warriors swapped stories that would never make it into the history books. The line moved with military precision. ID cards flashed, names were checked against lists, and approved guests passed through with nods of acknowledgement. Langston had been doing this for 3 hours straight, and his routine was clockwork. Scan the ID, match the face, check the list, wave them through, or politely redirect them to the general admission area. Then the old man arrived. He didn't look like much, maybe 5'8" in his boots, with the kind of build that suggested he'd been solid muscle once, but had settled into comfortable stockiness. His bald head gleamed with perspiration, and deep lines around his eyes spoke of decades spent squinting into harsh sunlight. He wore a plain olive drab shirt that had seen better days, faded jeans, and leather boots that had walked more miles than most cars had driven. No uniform, no ribbons, no ID badge dangling from a lanyard. Nothing that screamed military VIP. "Morning, sir," Langston said, his voice carrying the professional courtesy drilled into every soldier. "I'll need to see your credentials." The old man's gray eyes swept past Langston to the command tent, studying it with the intensity of someone solving a puzzle. "I'm here for the ceremony," he said, his voice carrying the faint rasp of a longtime smoker. "Yes, sir, I understand that, but I still need to verify your authorization to enter the restricted area." The old man's gaze returned to Langston, and for a moment, the private felt like he was being evaluated by someone who'd seen things that would make most people's nightmares seem like bedtime stories. "You got Captain Raleigh in there?" the old man asked, nodding toward the tent. Langston's eyebrows rose slightly. "That would be General Raleigh, sir. He's scheduled to speak at 1100 hours. A ghost of a smile crossed the old man's weathered features. "General now, huh? Good for him." He paused, seemingly lost in thought. "Tell him Echo 7 says the tide never lies." "I'm sorry, what?" "Just tell him exactly that. Echo 7 says the tide never lies. He'll know what it means." Langston glanced over at Sergeant Martinez, who'd been supervising the checkpoint while scrolling through his tablet. Martinez looked up, caught the questioning look, and wandered over with the expression of a man who'd seen every possible variation of civilian confusion. "Problem, Langston?" "This gentleman would like to speak with General Raleigh, Sergeant. He doesn't have credentials, but he asked me to pass along a message." Martinez sized up the old man with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent 15 years separating legitimate requests from the ravings of conspiracy theorists and wannabe warriors. The old man stood patiently, hands clasped behind his back, in a posture that seemed both relaxed and ready. "What's the message?" Martinez asked. "Echo 7 says the tide never lies," Langston repeated, feeling foolish as the words left his mouth. Martinez's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. A flicker of recognition, maybe, or confusion. "I'll pass it up the chain," he said after a moment, "but you'll need to wait over there, sir." The old man nodded and moved to the designated waiting area, a patch of shade beneath an oak tree that had probably been standing when the base was first established. He didn't pace or check his watch or show any signs of impatience. He just stood there, hands behind his back, watching the controlled chaos of the ceremony preparations. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Langston was starting to wonder if they should just direct the old man to the general admission area when Martinez's radio crackled to life. "Checkpoint Alpha, this is Command." "Go ahead, Command." "Regarding the individual with the Echo 7 message, escort him to the command tent immediately. Full access, no questions asked." "And Sergeant?" "Yes, sir." "Handle this personally and keep it quiet." Martinez stared at his radio as if it had just started speaking Mandarin. In 15 years of military service, he'd never heard a directive quite like that one. He looked at Langston, who was wearing the same expression of bewilderment. "You heard the man?" Martinez said finally. "Let's go." The old man didn't seem surprised by the sudden change in his status. He fell into step beside Martinez as they approached the command tent, his pace steady and unhurried. As they drew closer, Langston could see the tent was even more impressive up close, easily large enough to house a small aircraft, with multiple sections and what looked like satellite communication equipment discreetly positioned around the perimeter. Martinez spoke quietly into his radio as they approached the main entrance. "Command, this is Sergeant Martinez, approaching with the Echo 7 individual." "Copy that, Sergeant. General Raleigh is waiting." The tent flap was pulled aside, and Martinez gestured for the old man to enter. As he stepped inside, conversations that had been flowing like water suddenly froze. The interior of the tent was a testament to military pageantry. Flags from every branch of service, display cases filled with medals and commendations, and enough gold braid to outfit a small army. At the center of it all stood General Raleigh. He was everything central casting would order for a military leader. Tall, silver-haired, with a chest full of ribbons and the kind of bearing that suggested he'd never back down from anything in his life. His face was the map of a career spent in the world's most dangerous places, and his eyes held the weight of decisions that had shaped history. When he saw the old man, those eyes widened. His ramrod-straight posture somehow became even more rigid. And then, in a move that shocked every person in that tent, General Raleigh snapped to attention and rendered a perfect salute. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the suddenly silent crowd. "Lewis Kane, you're supposed to be dead." The old man, Lewis Kane, returned the salute with the crisp precision of someone who'd performed the gesture thousands of times. "Aren't we all, Captain? It's General now." "I noticed. Congratulations." What happened next wasn't part of the official program. General Raleigh personally escorted Kane through the crowd, and conversations stopped in their wake like the Red Sea parting. Some of the older officers stood at attention as they passed. Others whispered to their neighbors, trying to place the face or understand the significance of the moment. Kane's name was never announced. His face never appeared in any of the official photographs. But everyone in that tent understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. The return of a ghost, a legend, a man whose existence had been scrubbed from the official records, but whose actions had echoed through decades of military history. Because 27 years ago, during a mission so classified that even its code name was classified, Navy electronics specialist Lewis Kane had done the impossible. When a sabotage guidance system threatened to turn 5 American operatives into fish food off the coast of a country that officially didn't exist, Kane had stripped down to his underwear, descended into the flooded electronics compartment of a sinking submarine, and rewired the entire navigation system by touch alone in complete darkness. He'd kept that sub running on jury-rigged systems for 18 hours, while enemy destroyers searched the waters above. He'd guided 5 men to safety using nothing but his ears, his instincts, and a prayer to whatever gods watch over fools and heroes. His official record showed he died in a training accident 6 months later. His real record was locked away in a vault so secure that even the people who built it had forgotten where they put the key. But in the waters off that unnamed coast, among the men who'd lived because of his genius and courage, he would always be Echo 7. And apparently, even after 3 decades, his call sign still opened doors. As Kane disappeared into the crowd of dignitaries, shaking hands with men who'd built their careers on missions he'd made possible, General Raleigh pulled out his phone and made a call that would change everything. Within minutes, a black sedan with government plates was racing toward Fort Darlington, carrying documents that hadn't seen daylight in 3 decades. The Pentagon had 48 hours to decide whether Louis Kane's official death certificate was going to become very officially revoked. Back at the checkpoint, Private Langston stood in stunned silence, trying to process what he'd just witnessed. Sergeant Martinez clapped him on the shoulder with a grin that suggested he'd just watched history unfold. "Kid," Martinez said, lighting up a cigarette with hands that trembled slightly, "in 15 years of service, I've never seen anything like that. That old man just walked into a room full of generals and made them all remember they were once young soldiers who owed their lives to a ghost." The ceremony continued as planned, but everyone knew the script had been rewritten. When General Raleigh took the podium an hour later, he deviated from his prepared remarks about Operation Cinderwake. Instead, he spoke about the unsung heroes whose names would never appear on monuments, whose sacrifices lived only in the memories of the men they'd saved. He never mentioned Louis Kane by name, but every person in that tent understood they'd just met a legend who'd been officially erased but never truly forgotten. As the ceremony wound down and guests began filtering out, Kane found himself standing alone near the tent's back entrance, watching the controlled chaos of military breakdown. Equipment was being packed, chairs stacked, flags carefully folded. Fort Darlington was dying the way all military installations die, with precision, efficiency, and just a touch of melancholy. A young lieutenant approached him with a clipboard, clearly confused about where this unregistered guest fit into the departure protocol. Kane simply smiled, shook the confused officer's hand, and walked away, disappearing into the Virginia afternoon as quietly as he'd arrived, leaving behind only questions and the lingering sense that some stories are too important to stay buried forever. As the crowd dispersed and Fort Darlington prepared for its final sunset, one thing became crystal clear. The most powerful weapon in any military arsenal isn't a gun or a bomb or a missile. Sometimes it's just a single phrase, whispered by the right person at the right moment, that can move mountains and open doors that have been sealed by decades of silence. What secrets from your past still have the power to change everything? Like this story, if Louis Kane's courage inspired you, and follow our page for more untold stories of forgotten heroes who change history from the shadows. Don't let these legends fade into obscurity. Subscribe now for more incredible stories of hidden heroism. Your next favorite tale of courage and sacrifice is just one click away.